yes, yes, yes.
Who are you exchanging these emails with?
Stephen Duders, who was at the time was my assistant.
And what are you and Mr. Duders discussing here?
Gobbledygook, essentially. It was, as I remember, it was a day of work, and there were times when I would send a text to Mr. Duders, because he's the worrisome type. I would send him a text in jest, of course, and to get a rise out of him, to get some reaction out of him. So, you know, I would tell him things like, you know, I woke up and I'm bleeding profusely from the inside of my ear. Is that normal? You know, it would be things like that. So this is exactly the same kind of thing. I think we were even referencing The Hangover, the film The Hangover, in part of this, about the Mike Tyson and sort of bizarre circus that I was telling him that I had in my room, and that there was blood everywhere. It was a joke to just sort of throw him off, worry him, and make. Ultimately, it was a joke, and we were laughing about it.
Mr. Depp, what if any portion of this email exchange is literally true?
We're all set to leave here at approximately 1:30 p.m. Hope you rested well.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to talk to you about some text messages that Mr. Rottenborn showed you where you refer to the monster, and this is in the context of in conversations with that don't include Ms. Heard. Do you remember seeing some of those communications?
Yes.
Okay. First, I'd like to show you Defendant's Exhibit 427, please, which is a text message from you to Jerry Judge. How are you using the term monster in this context when you're communicating with Mr. Judge?
The monster could essentially, the monster could, it could be two separate things. The monster in her eyes was my,
Objection as to what the monster was in Ms. Heard's eyes, Your Honor.
All right. I'll just state as to her eyes if you want to
Okay.
ask. Rephrase.
the monster was defined by Ms. Heard as this out of control
Same objection,
thing.
Your Honor. What Ms. Heard's view of the monster was is not for this witness to say.
Mr. Depp, how do you know how Ms. Heard defined the word monster?
She said the words to me.
And what words did she say with respect to the term monster?
It was her go-to phrase, and it was the go-to phrase for me being, again, you know, as has been embellished and elaborated, the drug use or the drink or the whatever, but the monster was, for me, and again, you start to think about these things and you put it in your own head, in what the real context is. The monster was sobriety. The monster was trying to be sober because I was plagued by these requests to stop drinking. But the monster could also be if a if a conversation, if something starts as a conversation, which would quickly ramp up to quite an antagonizing argument, if I responded to her, if I took part in the verbal back and forth where people do in life end up saying obscenities, screaming obscenities at one another, or calling them names, or when it gets to that point, I mean, the monster was just for me, was just the guy who actually was dumb enough to continue to take part in arguments that would ultimately get nowhere. So that is one of the reasons why I would try to get away from Ms. Heard and not participate in her debates and the knowledge that she wanted to express to me, and circular and painful insults that were constant. It was rapid fire. So I stopped participating in those. I tried to walk away. I tried to go to another room, even to the point of locking myself in rooms so that she just could pound on the door and scream. That was clearly a mistake. I should have never fallen for that or taken the bait to allow myself to get into a conversation which led to an argument, which led to physical violence. It was not going to be good, so I would just walk away, which drove her through the roof.
So, Mr. Depp, why would you use the term monster when communicating with people other than Ms. Heard?
Well, because I heard it all the time. I mean, it was, as I said, that was her go-to. The monster. The monster's here. The monster's back. Monster. So I would refer to the monster again in terms of with Elton, or with friends Patti Smith. The monster was like with Elton. I believe it was just the monster was I let the monster creep back in or something. That is sobriety. That's what I'm telling him is I have failed. And I've had a drink, or I've been drinking. But my drinking, again, was not to excess. I would never went into blackouts or anything of that nature. I was disappointed in myself for not staying there. Although when you are constantly in a position to be harassed by your beloved other, what else could I do? I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to feel that, especially from one who had professed such love for me, but gave me mostly hatred.
Your Honor, I'm about to switch subjects, so if this would be a good time for the lunch break.
All right. We started a little later, so I don't mind going a little further.
Okay.
If you want to do that, go ahead.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to show you Defendant's Exhibit 161. I believe Mr. Rottenborn showed you this last week and again today.
Yes.
Do you recognize these text messages as between you and Ms. Heard?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Why are you informing Ms. Heard that there's a book called Disco Bloodbath?
When I texted her, 2:30 in the afternoon, I was in a bookstore, a used bookstore, or a bookstore that had a lot of first editions and things like that, which was sort of a passion. And I saw a book called Disco Bloodbath, and I thought it was a funny title. I can't say that I was necessarily referencing anything other than I thought it was a funny title, Disco Bloodbath. It sounded like a sort of a bad slasher movie to me. So I said, just thought you should know that there exists a book titled Disco Bloodbath. That's all. And then she said, we need that book. And then she asked me, is it about last Friday night by any chance? And then my answer to her, how can you make me smile about such a hideous moment? The fact is, this is a light-hearted exchange that she's even saying, we need that book. Then she makes a reference to last Friday night, which I don't recall what last Friday night was or whatever, so I just how can you make me smile about such a hideous moment? A hideous moment could have been some grotesque thing that we saw on television. It could have been anything. I don't recall now, but all I was saying is, and it even says at the end of my text, that's all. Disco Bloodbath, you know. So this was not we were not butting heads in this exchange whatsoever. It was very lighthearted.
Mr. Depp, I'd like to show you Defendant's Exhibit 375, which is another document Mr. Rottenborn showed you last week.
Yes.
Could you please remind the jury what's reflected in this photograph? This is from Australia. On March 8th, I believe it was.